Welcome to this special edition of Extreme Reloading. On our last special edition, posted about a month ago on YouTube, I was experimenting with the 168 grain cutting edge MTAC bullets. Now, my Ruger precision rifle has really shot well with a variety of different 168 grain bullets. So I was really interested in the design concept of these cutting edge bullets, also in 168 grain. Now, if you didn't get a chance to watch that entire video, let me summarize how things went. Well, we started off with what I'll end up calling Plan A, which was to work up an optimal charge weight for the 168 grain bullet using Norma cases and seating the bullet per one of the recommendations on Cutting Edge's website, which is to put their seal-tight band right up against the mouth of the case. So I followed all that, fired my OCW series of loads, identified a pretty good sill in that optimal charge weight series, and then I loaded 5 more rounds and fired them for group. Now this was all done at 100 yards to eliminate as much as possible any sort of error on my part. But the end result was pretty sad. The group was kind of not even a group. So kind of scratched my head and went back to the drawing board with Plan B. Now Plan B was to use a slightly different approach on the seating of that bullet. And that was to seat the bullet just off of the lands of this rifle, the Ruger precision rifle. So I went through that process and then loaded another 5 rounds in effectively the same Norma cases, fired for group, and the results were probably worse. So that was the outcome of that video, that special edition video, and it kind of left me wondering what the heck's going on. So some of our viewers had a few comments on that, had a few suggestions, and my idea at the end of that video was that we're just not stabilizing this bullet in that Ruger precision rifle. So following up on that, we continued that train of thought about stabilization. Now, why would one 168 grain bullet like the Sierra tipped Match Kings, why would they work so well, and yet another 168 grain bullet, the cutting edge, not work well really at all? Well, the cutting edge bullet, there's a couple things that are different about it. Number one is it's a monolithic bullet. It's complete copper. And so it's somewhat longer than the Sierra tipped Match King. Now, stabilization really is not so much based on the weight of the bullet. It's much more based on the length of the bullet. So to achieve stabilization, spin stabilization of a bullet, number one, your rifle has to have an adequate twist rate. And this 1 in 10 twist on the Ruger precision rifle, by all means, should be able to stabilize your standard 168 grain bullet. Well, the cutting edge MTAC isn't really your standard bullet. It is fairly longer, somewhat longer. So this idea is that that bullet just did not stabilize in this rifle. So the other way that a person can help stabilize a bullet is to drive it at a slightly faster muzzle velocity. So in this video, we're kind of back to the drawing board with what I'll call Plan C. What I'm doing here is I am going to, number one, I'm going to seat that bullet back to how I had it originally. In other words, the seal-tight band of these bullets will be placed right up against the mouth of the case. Those rounds did shoot somewhat better, slightly better, than when the bullets were seated out farther, really close, about 1/100 of an inch away from the land. So using that bullet seating, I'm going to shoot 10 more rounds. And because I've already shot a similar OCW series with the same bullet, the same seating, and essentially the same cases, I'm going to start my new OCW series near the end of the previous series. I'm going to work it up in 2/10 of a grain increments and powder charge, making sure that I still never exceed the maximum powder charge for this powder, which is RL15, and that charge is 45 grains. So, now that you know the background of this whole thing, let's take a look at how it all turned out. Okay, today I'm actually going to be running an optimal charge weight, that's OCW, and the ladder test simultaneously. Now, really, these two tests are mutually exclusive. And you can run the ladder test without having a chronograph. Now, I like to do this stuff all together with a chronograph, and actually I prefer OCW. So what we have right now, we have 2 rounds now, 3 rounds impacting, and what we're supposed to see, what we ideally expect to see, is that the first round in a string of, let's say, 10 rounds that are being fired, that first round should be with the lowest velocity, and it should impact lowest on the target. The second round should be slightly above it, the third slightly above it. Now, if we have 2 rounds that sort of make the snowman, then we're very interested in this, because what's happening is that at 2 separate charges, the rounds are impacting in the same place. Now that's exactly what we just saw. But we also want to look very closely at the chronograph, and actually I put more emphasis on using the chronograph and OCW, because all it is concerned with is the speed of that bullet out of the muzzle. There's lots of other things that can creep in and affect your ladder test, like barrel harmonics at those different velocities, including shooter error that might throw around one way or the other. All right, let's look at the ladder test results first. You know, we had a very nice snowman appear at rounds 2 and 3. But my concern about rounds 2 and 3 is that they really haven't achieved much more velocity. And remember, one of the things that we're trying to do is kind of pick up that velocity to drive these bullets to a little bit better stabilization. So I'm going to ignore rounds 2 and 3. But then I'm more interested in rounds 6 and 7, and even round 8. 6 and 7, another nice snowman appearing right there, and 8 on a 3-shot group, that's still you know, within a sub-MOA, or about an MOA type of group. So let's look very closely at rounds 6, 7, and 8 in the OCW test. So while rounds 6 and 7 impacted very, very closely to one another, when we look at the OCW results, round 6 showed a very low muzzle velocity in relation to round 7 and in rounds 8. In fact, it is rounds 7 and 8 that constitute the sill that we're looking for in the optimal charge weight. And indeed, OCW for this bullet seating and this case is 44.2 grains of RL15 powder. All right, I'm ready to try it one more time. It's about 70 degrees, just shy of that, 68 maybe. Mild wind should not affect these 168 grain bullets. I'm talking maybe a 3-4 mile per hour wind. And early in the morning, cleaned the bore. So to dry bore, I'm going to put a few rounds of factory ammo. This time I'm going to be using some Barnes factory ammo at a target 100 yards away. So that'll prime this barrel real well. And then we've got 5 rounds of these cutting edge bullets that I just loaded. There's that seal tight band placed up right up against the mouth of that case. And we're loading this at the optimal charge weight, so we should have the best chance possible of getting a good group out of these cutting edge bullets. Alright, there's our target. As I said, I started off with these Barnes 175 grains. I've just fired 3 rounds of those. That's not a bad group. And then I went to these cutting edge bullets. Round 1 was here. Round 2 there. 3, 4.
And for whatever reason, my round 5 flew off that way. Don't feel like I jerked it. Not really sure about this one. These here, as you can see, this is 100 yards, so this is about a 1 MOA group. It's going to be pretty close to that, maybe a little bit larger than that on extreme spread. But I really like, you know, these 3. Boy, that's an excellent group, but you can't count on that. You know, if we had 4 here, you know, 4th round, 5th round over there, so kind of really curious about this thing.
Well, what do I make of all this? You know, if I would have shot a 3-shot group and gotten those really nice 3 shots grouped up right there in the center of that square, I'd have said, wow, this worked really well. But my first shot actually was a bit high. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grouped up really well. And then my 5th was a flyer. It's possible that this bullet is still really not fully stabilized. It's giving indications that it's becoming stabilized and it's shooting better. I really don't think I pulled it. So we really can't just pick and choose the rounds that we want to use. It looks like there's some potential with these cutting edge bullets. I'm very intrigued with this whole design and the seal tight band and the fact that these are such consistent bullets. For me, really didn't work out well enough, and I'm sticking with my Sierra tipped Match Kings. Hey, thanks for watching this edition of Extreme Reloading Special Edition, the cutting edge bullets for the Ruger Precision Rifle.